Captain John Harris crouched behind a shattered wall, scanning the horizon with his rifle raised. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and burnt metal. Above, the sky was a dismal gray, occluded by the remnants of aerial combat. "Status report," John whispered into his comlink. "Area clear, Captain. No Drathix movement detected within 2 clicks," replied Sergeant Max Turner, his voice crackling slightly over the radio. John nodded to himself, eyes still fixed on the horizon. "All right, let's move up. Keep your eyes peeled and weapons ready. We don't know if—" A sharp crackle interrupted him, and a voice broke through, urgent and strained. "Contact! Contact! 3 o'clock! Hostile down!" John whirled toward the direction of the disturbance, catching sight of Corporal Luis Ramirez kneeling next to a fallen figure. The team quickly formed a perimeter around the area as John approached. As he neared, John realized the figure on the ground wasn't a Drathix soldier. It was smaller, less armored, and distinctly different in appearance. It was an alien, yes, but not one of their enemy combatants. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent quality, her features delicate and almost ethereal. "She's still breathing, but barely," Luis reported, checking her vitals. "Looks like she was left for dead." "Why would the Drathix abandon one of their own?" Max questioned, eyeing the alien warily. "She's not one of them," John said, crouching beside the figure. "Look at the insignia on her clothes. It's different. She could be from a faction we haven't encountered yet." The alien's eyelids fluttered and she murmured something inaudible. John leaned closer, trying to catch any intelligible words. Her hand weakly grasped his arm, her eyes meeting his. "Help me," she whispered in broken English, her voice hoarse and filled with pain. John looked back at his team, seeing their uncertainty. He made his decision quickly. "We're taking her with us. Luis, get the med kit. Max, secure our 6. We can't leave her here, not like this." "But sir, she's an alien. How can we trust her?" Max objected. "We can't, but we're not leaving her to die either," John replied firmly, his gaze locking onto the aliens. "What's your name?" "Lyra," she responded weakly. "Okay, Lyra, we're going to help you," John reassured her, helping to gently lift her as Luis returned with the first aid supplies. As they administered basic care, John tried to piece together her story through her intermittent phrases. She was a princess, betrayed and exiled by her own people in a power struggle that mirrored the worst of human conflicts. By the time they had stabilized her as best they could under the circumstances, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows over the war-torn landscape. John ordered his team forward, Lyra supported between him and Luis. As they moved, John pondered the implications of their new charge. She could be a diplomatic asset or a dangerous liability. Yet, looking down at her, John felt a stirring of something he hadn't expected. Not just duty, but a genuine desire to protect this unexpected survivor from a world as cruel and unforgiving as his own. With each step back to their encampment, the weight of their decision pressed on him. But so too did a flicker of hope. Perhaps not for peace, but at least for some semblance of humanity amidst the chaos of war. Under the cloak of night, the small group navigated through the rubble-strewn landscape, their path illuminated only by the occasional flicker of distant explosions and the soft glow of their tactical lights. John Harris led the way, his mind racing with the implications of their new companion, Princess Lyra, whose presence added an unforeseen complexity to their mission. "Captain, where exactly are we taking her?" Sergeant Max Turner whispered, casting a skeptical glance toward Lyra, who leaned heavily on Corporal Luis Ramirez for support. "We need to find a secure location first," John replied, his voice low. "Somewhere to regroup and figure out our next move." Lyra's condition had stabilized, but her presence was a secret that could not be broadcasted until they understood more. As they trudged through a narrow alley, Lyra's breaths came in shallow gasps, each step a testament to her determination and pain. "I can walk on my own now," Lyra insisted, gently pulling away from Luis. Her voice was stronger now, though her body language spoke of immense discomfort. John watched her cautiously, admiring her resolve. "We appreciate your courage, Lyra, but don't push yourself. We can't afford any delays if you collapse." Lyra nodded, accepting Luis's arm again. "Thank you," she murmured, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar terrain warily. As dawn approached, John led the group into the ruins of what once was a small town. The skeletal frames of buildings provided minimal cover, but it was the best they could manage under the circumstances. He chose a collapsed storefront with walls still mostly intact for temporary shelter. Once settled, John initiated a debriefing, turning to Lyra with clear, uncompromising eyes. Lyra, we need information. You mentioned your people. Why would they abandon a princess? Lyra's eyes darkened, her hands clasping and unclasping in her lap. It's complicated. In our culture, the royal line must be kept pure and strong. My brother believed I was too sympathetic toward other species, including humans. He saw it as a weakness, so he stripped me of my rank and left me on the battlefield, hoping I would be killed by either side. Max exchanged a troubled look with Luis. And you think your brother wants to escalate this war? It's not just about the war, Lyra explained. It's about proving superiority. If he shows he can conquer humans, no one will question his rule. John processed this, his mind racing with strategic implications. So your brother doesn't just want victory, he wants domination at any cost. Yes, Lyra confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. And he will stop at nothing to achieve it. Then we have more reasons to keep you safe and use the information you provide wisely, John concluded, his decision clear. We'll need to contact HQ at some point, but for now we lay low. Max, set up a perimeter. Luis, help me scout for any resources. Lyra, try to get some rest. As Max and Luis set about their tasks, Lyra looked up at John with a faint smile. Thank you, Captain Harris. I know I'm not what you were expecting to find here. John returned her smile with a nod. Sometimes the unexpected turns are what define us. Rest now. We have a long road ahead. As he walked away to assist Luis, John felt the weight of leadership pressing down on him. Protecting Lyra was not just about safeguarding an alien princess. It was potentially about changing the course of a war. Each step forward was a step into the unknown, but John was determined to navigate it with the honor and duty that had always guided him. The pre-dawn silence was shattered by the distant hum of Drathix drones sweeping the area. John Harris motioned for his team to stay low as the ominous buzzing grew closer. Looks like they're not just scouting randomly anymore, he murmured to Max and Luis. They're searching for something, or someone. Luis glanced at Lyra, who was tucked away in the shadows of the ruined building, her face strained with worry. Think they're onto us? It's likely, John said grimly. Lyra's brother wouldn't just abandon her without keeping tabs. They watched as the drones moved systematically, their lights piercing through the darkness. John knew they had to move soon or risk capture. Pack up, we're heading out, he ordered. Lyra, can you keep up? I'll manage, she assured him, her voice steady despite her pale appearance. As they prepared to leave, John's radio crackled to life. Captain Harris, this is base. Do you copy? John responded quickly, stepping away from the group to speak privately. This is Harris. Go ahead, base. We've got intel on enemy movements heading your way. Looks like a targeted search. Be advised, you might have a leak in your location, the voice on the other end warned. A cold chill ran down John's spine. Understood, base. We're moving out now. Harris out. He turned back to his team, his face set. We have a potential leak. Trust no one outside this group. Max nodded, checking his weapon. What's the plan, Captain? We head to the secondary rendezvous point. It's less than 3 miles west from here, John said, leading the way as they quickly left their temporary shelter. The journey was tense, with every rustle of wind sounding like an enemy footstep. As they neared a small clearing, the sudden roar of an engine froze them in their tracks. Within seconds, a Drathix hovercraft burst from the tree line, its guns aimed directly at them. Take cover, John yelled, diving behind a fallen log. Gunfire erupted around them, splinters and dirt flying into the air. Luis and Max returned fire, providing cover as John tried to locate Lyra. He found her a few yards away, pinned down by the intense firefight. Lyra, stay down, he shouted over the noise. As the hovercraft circled for another pass, a sudden explosion on its side sent it crashing into the woods. The group looked up in surprise and relief to see a drone spiraling away, smoking heavily. Was that one of ours? Luis asked, puzzled. No time to figure it out now, Max said. Let's move. They sprinted from the clearing, but John couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that gnawed at him. As they slowed to a cautious walk, he addressed Lyra directly. Did you see who shot down that hovercraft? Lyra shook her head. No, but it's clear your people aren't the only ones with internal conflicts. John pondered this, realizing the depth of their predicament. We need to get you to a secure location, fast. Whoever is after you isn't stopping anytime soon. As they continued their trek, the betrayal within his own ranks weighed heavily on John. The potential of a traitor made every decision more critical, every moment fraught with danger. But the resolution to protect Lyra and uncover the truth kept him pushing forward, even as the shadows around them seemed to grow darker with each passing step. After hours of relentless travel through dense, hostile terrain, Captain John Harris and his team finally approached what he hoped would be a temporary refuge. The sky was lightening with the early hints of dawn, casting a soft glow that barely penetrated the thick canopy of the ancient forest. "This is it," John whispered, pointing to an overgrown path barely visible among the foliage. "Old reconnaissance maps show a bunker from the first expansion era around here. It should be shielded from most scanning tech." Max Turner, his rifle at the ready, nodded. "If it's still intact, it could give us the break we need." John led the way, his eyes scanning for any signs of recent activity. As they moved, Lyra's steps grew increasingly labored, her earlier determination waning under the weight of her injuries and the grueling pace. Luis Ramirez stayed close to her, offering support. The path twisted through the underbrush and opened into a small clearing, where the remnants of an ancient structure emerged from the earth like the bones of a long-dead creature. Covered in moss and vines, the bunker's entrance was barely distinguishable from the surrounding greenery. "Here we are," John announced, stepping forward to inspect the entrance. He pulled away some of the vines, revealing a rusted metal door. "Help me with this," he motioned to Luis. Together, they heaved against the stubborn barrier until it groaned open, revealing a dark, musty interior. One by one, they entered, their lights piercing the darkness. Inside, the air was cool and damp, a stark contrast to the humid exterior. The bunker was small, consisting of a main room lined with empty shelves and a couple of smaller rooms, likely used for storage and communications. "It's not much, but it'll keep us out of sight," John said, checking the structural integrity of the room. "Let's get comfortable. We might be here a while." Lyra sank down against a wall, her face pale but her eyes alert. "Thank you, John, for everything." John nodded, then turned to address the group. "Max, set up a perimeter scan. Luis, take first watch. I'll try to get some communications gear working. We need to report in and figure out our next steps." As they each set about their tasks, John worked on an old, dusty radio set, hoping to establish a secure line to his command. After several minutes of tinkering, he managed to catch a weak signal. "This is Captain Harris calling base. Do you copy?" Static crackled through the speaker before a voice responded. "Copy, Captain. We've been trying to reach you. What's your status?" "We've got Princess Lyra with us. She's injured but stable. We're holed up in an old bunker, coordinates to follow on a secure channel. We believe there's a traitor in our ranks," John reported succinctly. The voice on the other end paused. "Understood, Captain. Maintain your position. We're sending reinforcements. Keep the princess safe. She's key to this conflict. And Harris, watch your back." "Roger that," John replied, his gaze shifting to Lyra. He turned off the radio and met her eyes. "Help is on the way, but it might take some time. You're safe here for now." Lyra nodded, a fragile smile crossing her lips. "I trust you, John. I'm ready to tell you everything you need to know about my brother's plans and the Drathix weapons. It's time your people know what they're truly up against." As John sat down next to her, ready to listen, he realized that this bunker wasn't just a sanctuary from the physical dangers of the war-torn planet. It was also a haven for truths that could alter the course of their conflict. With each word Lyra spoke, the stakes grew higher, and so did John's resolve to end this war, not just for humanity, but for the alien princess who had shown him that trust and bravery knew no species. Under the dim glow of the bunker's makeshift lighting, Captain John Harris listened intently as Princess Lyra detailed her brother's sinister plans and the capabilities of the Drathix weapon known as the Starbreaker. The weapon, capable of devastating entire planets, was a far greater threat than anyone on Earth had anticipated. "We need to act, and soon," John concluded grimly after Lyra finished. "The information you've given us could change everything, Lyra. We need to verify it, gather evidence, and expose your brother's plans to the world." Lyra nodded, determination lighting her eyes. "I can guide you to one of their smaller facilities. It's less guarded but should have the information we need to prove their intentions." "Then that's our next move," John decided, turning to his team. "We're going on an offensive. Max, Luis, prep for recon. We'll leave at first light." The dawn was gray and overcast, perfect for a stealth mission. The facility Lyra mentioned was located in a less hostile area, but still well within Drathix-controlled territory. The team dressed in dark, non-reflective gear, minimizing their chances of being spotted on their approach. As they neared the facility, The low hum of energy shields and the occasional patrol of Drathic soldiers heightened the tension. Lyra, despite her injuries, moved with a quiet grace, her knowledge of Drathic's protocols proving invaluable. "They use biometric scans for access," she whispered as they crouched behind a ridge overlooking the facility. "I can bypass the system, but I'll need cover." "Understood," John said. "Luis, you're with me. We'll create a diversion. Max, you stay with Lyra. Once we're in, it's all about speed. Grab any data you can." The diversion was simple but effective. John and Luis opened fire on a distant part of the facility, drawing guards away from the main entrance. As the Drathics scrambled to respond, Lyra and Max made their move. Lyra approached the security terminal, her fingers moving quickly over the interface. The door clicked open silently, and they slipped inside. The corridors were stark and angular, lit by an eerie blue light that cast long shadows. "Here," Lyra said, leading Max to a control room. "The databanks should be in here." Max stood guard at the door while Lyra worked on extracting the data. Her hands were steady, even as the sounds of conflict grew louder outside. After what felt like an eternity, she finally nodded. "I've got it. Let's get out of here." They retraced their steps, meeting up with John and Luis, who had managed to evade capture. The team hurried back towards the safety of the forest, the stolen data a heavy responsibility in their hands. Once they were a safe distance away, John allowed himself a moment to breathe. "Good work, everyone. Let's see what we've got." He glanced at the device Lyra had secured, its screen flickering with encrypted files. Lyra leaned over the device, her fingers deftly navigating the complex security. As the files decrypted, diagrams and text scrolled across the screen, revealing detailed plans and simulations of the Starbreaker's capabilities. "It's worse than I thought," Lyra said quietly. If activated, the Starbreaker wouldn't just destroy planets. It would destabilize star systems, creating a chain reaction of destruction. John felt a chill as he processed the information. "We need to get this to command immediately. This isn't just about the war anymore. It's about preventing a catastrophe." With renewed urgency, the team made their way back to the bunker, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. The evidence they had collected was not just a means to end a war, but possibly the only way to avert a galactic disaster. As they walked, the bond between them, forged in the heat of battle and the shadows of covert operations, grew stronger. They were no longer just allies by circumstance. They were a team united by a cause far greater than any of them had imagined. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale light across the scarred landscape, Captain John Harris and his team, burdened with the critical data from the Drathics facility, faced their next major challenge, returning to human-controlled territory. The journey back was fraught with peril, as they needed to evade both Drathics patrols and any potential human traitors who had been alerted to their movements. "Keep sharp," John instructed, his gaze sweeping the terrain. "We're not clear until we're back behind our lines, and even then we stay vigilant." Lyra, though visibly exhausted from the night's exertions, kept pace, her determination clear. "Once we deliver this evidence, my brother's plans will be exposed," she said, a mix of hope and worry in her voice. As they neared a narrow pass that would lead them to safer grounds, the unmistakable sound of an engine hummed through the air, a drone, and it was closing in fast. "Down!" John shouted, pulling Lyra to the ground as the drone swooped overhead. Luis Ramirez and Max Turner opened fire, their bullets finding the drone's underbelly. With a whirring of damaged circuits, it crashed into a nearby rock face, its surveillance mission cut short. "Move! Move!" John urged, leading the sprint through the pass. They were close now, but the tension only mounted. Emerging from the pass, they were suddenly met with a roadblock, a unit of human soldiers with weapons trained on them. John raised his hand slowly, recognizing the insignia of his own military. "This is Captain Harris with Team Delta. We are not hostile." The commanding officer, a stern woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward. "Captain Harris, you and your team are to hand over all materials and come with us for debriefing." John eyed her warily. "Lieutenant, we need to get this information to command immediately. It's critical to the war effort." Her gaze flicked to Lyra, suspicion evident. "All due procedures will be followed, Captain. Surrender your weapons." Reluctantly, John and his team complied, handing over their arms and the encrypted data device. As they were escorted to a temporary holding area, John kept close to Lyra, whispering, "Stay calm. We'll sort this out." Hours passed with them under watchful eyes until finally, an envoy from command arrived. Major Anderson, a high-ranking intelligence officer, entered the tent where John and his team were held. "Captain Harris," he greeted, a folder of documents under his arm. "Major," John nodded. "We need to discuss the urgency of the information we've recovered." Anderson sat, opening the folder. "I've been briefed about the potential contents. It seems you've also brought us a Drathix princess." Lyra stepped forward. "I am Princess Lyra of the Drathix. The information I've provided will prove that my brother intends to use the Starbreaker against your world. You must act." After a lengthy discussion where Lyra detailed the capabilities and intended use of the Starbreaker, Anderson's demeanor shifted from skeptical to gravely concerned. "This changes everything," he acknowledged, finally convinced. "We'll need to strategize a response immediately." As they were released from custody, John's respect for Lyra deepened. Despite the layers of distrust and the grueling challenges, she had remained steadfast. John and his team were escorted to the main command center, where plans were rapidly being formed in response to the new threat. As they walked, John felt a surge of solidarity. They were no longer just a team. They were the pivotal point on which the war might turn. With the data secure and their mission clear, the battle ahead loomed large, but together they were ready to face whatever came next. After hours of strategic meetings and rapid preparations at the main command center, Captain John Harris and his team were ready to undertake the most crucial mission of the war. With the information provided by Princess Lyra, the military leadership had devised a plan to destroy the Drathix's Starbreaker before it could be activated. The mission was not only to thwart the weapon, but also to end the threat posed by Lyra's brother and his regime. "All right, team," John addressed Max and Luis, his tone imbued with the gravity of their task. "This is it. We're going in hot, and it's going to be dangerous. But we know what's at stake. Humanity, and possibly countless other species, depend on our success." Lyra, now equipped with a protective suit and armed for her own safety, nodded resolutely. "I will lead you through the palace defenses to the Starbreaker's control room. My brother's forces will be heavy, but I know the layouts and the security protocols." The plan was to infiltrate the Drathix capital using a stealth insertion craft, land at a secure entry point that Lyra had identified, and navigate through the palace to reach and destroy the Starbreaker. The operation required absolute precision, given the heavy defenses they would encounter. As they neared the Drathix planet, the tension aboard the craft was palpable. John went over the plan one last time, ensuring everyone was clear on their roles and the contingencies in place. The craft landed quietly in the cover of darkness at the outskirts of the Drathix capital. The city loomed ahead, its towering structures casting long shadows under the moon's light. John led his team swiftly and silently towards the palace, their path meticulously planned to avoid patrols. They encountered their first obstacle, a security checkpoint, faster than anticipated. Lyra stepped forward, interfacing with the security system. "Cover me," she whispered. Within moments, the barrier deactivated, and they moved forward. As they penetrated deeper into the palace, the sounds of the Drathix military mobilizing grew louder. "They know we're here," Luis muttered, checking his weapon. "Stay focused," John replied, leading them through a maze of corridors. "We're almost there." They reached the control room, only to find it heavily guarded. A fierce firefight erupted. John and his team took cover, returning fire with disciplined bursts. Max took a hit, his armor absorbing most of the impact, but the force knocked him down. "I'm okay," Max shouted, getting back to his feet and resuming fire. Lyra, showing a calm only born from royal training, moved to the control panel amidst the chaos. "Cover me!" she shouted over the gunfire. John and Luis provided covering fire, taking down Drathix soldiers as Lyra worked furiously at the controls. The battle reached its crescendo as more Drathix reinforcements arrived. Just as it seemed they would be overwhelmed, Lyra turned from the console, her face alight with triumph. "It's done. The weapon is disabled." Without wasting a moment, John rallied his team. "Fall back! Move!" They retreated under heavy fire, back through the corridors they had memorized on their way in. Explosions rocked the palace as internal defenses triggered in response to the sabotage. Reaching the extraction point, the team boarded their craft under the cover of another team's diversionary tactics. As they lifted off, the palace exploded in a massive fireball behind them, the Starbreaker obliterated within. As they made their escape, John looked over at Lyra, who, despite the exhaustion and adrenaline, managed a weary smile. "You did it," he said, admiration and relief heavy in his voice. "We did it," she corrected, her eyes meeting each of his team members. "Together." The craft sped away from the burning capital, the dark sky slowly giving way to dawn. As the first rays of light pierced the horizon, they illuminated the faces of a team bound by more than just a mission. They had shared a moment that would forever be etched in history, knowing they had not only prevented a catastrophe, but also paved the way for a new beginning. The return journey to Earth was quiet, the weight of what had been accomplished settling over Captain John Harris and his team. Each member was lost in thought, reflecting on the harrowing mission that had not only changed the course of the war, but had potentially shifted the balance of interstellar power. As their craft entered Earth's atmosphere, the familiar sight of the blue planet was a welcome relief. Once they landed, John and his team, along with Princess Lyra, were greeted as heroes. There were salutes, handshakes, and a flurry of media. Yet, amidst the fanfare, there was an urgent undercurrent, as leaders from around the world sought to understand the implications of the Drathix weapon's destruction and what it meant for future relations with other civilizations. Lyra, now recognized as a pivotal figure in the conflict, was asked to address the United Nations. With John by her side, she spoke not only of the threats that had been faced, but also of the opportunities for peace and mutual growth. Her speech was met with standing ovations, a symbol of hope for a united interstellar community. In the days that followed, John and Lyra worked closely with global and interstellar leaders to establish a framework for peace talks. As they navigated this new diplomatic landscape, the bond between them deepened, rooted in shared experiences and a mutual desire to forge a better future. One evening, as they walked through the gardens of the United Nations headquarters, John turned to Lyra. "It's strange," he began, "how life throws us into the paths we're meant to take. If you hadn't been left behind, none of this might have happened." Lyra nodded, her gaze taking in the serene setting. "And if you hadn't saved me, I would not have seen the strength and compassion that humans possess. You've changed not just my view, but potentially the view of the entire galaxy about humanity." John smiled, a sense of contentment filling him. "There's a lot of work ahead of us. Are you ready for this new chapter?" "I am," Lyra replied confidently. "With you and your team by my side, I believe we're ready for anything." Their conversation was interrupted by a call from the Secretary General, requesting their presence at a planning session. As they headed back to the building, John felt a sense of purpose that went beyond military duty, a purpose that was about building and maintaining peace. The story culminated in a grand ceremony where John, his team, and Lyra were formally recognized for their bravery and crucial role in averting a galactic disaster. As medals were pinned and hands were shaken, John looked out over the crowd, seeing faces filled with hope and determination. Later, standing on a balcony overlooking the city, John reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The world was still imperfect, and the future was uncertain, but there was a sense of promise in the air. He turned as Lyra joined him, her presence a reassuring reminder of the progress they had made together. "The road ahead is long and likely fraught with challenges," John said, his voice contemplative. "But for the first time in a long while, I feel hopeful about the future." Lyra took his hand, her touch warm. "As long as we face it together, I share that hope." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the city, John and Lyra looked out over a war-torn yet resilient landscape, now teeming with the potential for peace and unity. In this new dawn, they stood together, not just as a soldier and a princess, but as beacons of a hopeful future, ready to guide humanity and their allies into an era of understanding and cooperation.